Hello, thank you all for coming today. Especially with the weather out, I didn't want to get out of the house, and I appreciate that you guys did. It was rainy where we were at, and I wanted to stay home. So thank you for coming out on our somewhat rainy, somewhat sunny afternoon to listen to this. Pitching games to publishers. Right, so we can go through this part really quick. I know who I am. Hopefully, oops, there we go. I'm Cheryl. Basically, I'm co-founder and director at Prideful Sloth. Our last game that we made was Yonder Cloudcatcher Chronicles. There's a little bit of a random blurb about me, which basically just says, I work a lot, I design a bit, I like Tim Tams, I Pokemon, and I like my last game I made. So that's basically what that says. Also, I'm now using my jammies as a tax write-off because they have sloths on them, and I put them up as my profile pic. So there we go, done. That's the real reason that's there. A random spiel about Prideful Sloth, micro AAA, known for technical excellence, focus on player-driven experience. We have skilled people on our team. That's basically what that's going to say too. So, getting into the real bones of this. Right, so topics. Things that you may or may not know, or words you may or may not recognize. Hopefully by the end of this, they become part of your vocabulary and part of your toolkit when you start pitching to publishers. So we have what we call a sell sheet. Pitch deck, I think most people are around, but also wanted to drill into project budgeting and project scheduling, because that tends to be where the biggest hangups are when people are doing pitch decks. I see some nodding. A company deck, which was a new one for us. When we first started pitching, suddenly somebody asked us for one. We're like, well, crap, what's that? Google helped us figure that out, so we're here to help you figure it out too. And then just some general advice along the way. Also, Joel, the other co-founder and director at Prideful Sloth, the memes are because he said, it's really boring and it needs more pictures, so you will get lots of pictures. So, all right. So what do we got? Okay. It's a business talk. There's no way around business talks not being boring, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot in here, and hopefully we can make it as fun for a business talk as we can. So let's keep it interactive. If people want to talk, ask questions, ask them as we go along rather than holding them to the end, because I think questions are going to be more relevant in context of the conversation we're having at the time, rather than waiting an hour down the road and then looping back to it. So raise hands, stand up, shout, interrupt. Again, let's work on this together. If I'm going too fast, too slow, or there's some topics that I call out but don't necessarily dive into, we can start talking about those a little bit. I tried to prepare slides for the main topics, and so I can't really cover detail of every single slide that a pitch deck will have. Otherwise, we'll be here for a week. So we'll work on it. And again, your mileage may vary on all of this. At the end of the day, all of our pitching comes from console games and PC games. There's some, to some extent, you're going to still need the same sort of documentation for mobile games or other things. But again, it's just, this isn't a you must do all of this. This is our experience, and you need to play with it to fit your circumstances. Right. The sell sheet. Sorry, I love EB Games sales. They crack me up. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a thing of beauty. So I'm going to get into some examples of what comes out of a sell sheet and then actually talk to you about what it is. So this is from when we started to pitch Yonder. So we had a project name at the time, some imagery from the game. Give your project a name. Always have a name for it. It doesn't have to be your final name, but just give it a name so you have a frame of reference to talk about rather than my game. Just pick something. Little bits that we talked about was things about what the player experience is going to be. That's the little player way slide. What are some of the things that are going to happen in the game? The new seasons, new discoveries. We had 4 seasons, things would lock and unlock as we went through the game, and also a little title comparison. So these are some of the bits that we put in there. Title comparisons are really useful, what it is, what it isn't, what's its closest, and what sort of categories does it lean on. Now, the purpose of all of this comes down to, this is a sales pitch. This is your foot in the door for saying, hey, I've got a good idea. I want to talk to you about my good idea. Take this, look at it, please. It's also helping you build a business partnership. It's giving them a first idea about who you are and what you're making, and that's really important. First impressions, we say, are always important. You want to give them some images, some concept art, because those are pretty pictures. Pretty pictures sell more than text, a la business presentations. We know this. So. And talk about your cool features. And really just this is a marketing thing. You want to hype it up. When we first started writing one of these, we joked and said, what would EB Games say? Because at the end of the day, it is a sales sheet and you want to sell it like you would to a customer, except these investors, these publishers are now your customers. They're the people who are going to give you money to make this product. So take a look around at what places like EB Games, Best Buy, all the people who sell games out there, and see how they're talking about the games that are similar to your audience, because that's going to be the thing that gives you an idea of what does the consumer want to hear. So within our sell sheet, the things that we covered off, and to be very clear on this, we kept it to 2 pages. It's a very high-level thing. It's not detailed. 2 pages max, and that includes the images. And as you saw in the examples, it's a couple of paragraphs text per thing max. So we covered the premise. Now, premise versus story. Nobody wants your story. They just want to know right now why your world exists. And that's what you give them, enough to tell them why your world exists. What are some interesting features that you see coming out of your game? Like for us, it was the seasonals and how things would unlock and lock based off of seasons. So that's what we covered. But what's do you feel is interesting about your game? Player experience. We talked about what the player is going to do in this game. Talk about it from an actionable point of view. Talk about it and tell them what they're going to experience. If you've got space in all of this, your design pillars are good, and the reason the design pillars work is because it sets a tone for exactly what your game is. With Yonder, one of our pillars, it was really important, was a safe and inviting world, and that immediately set the tone for this is not a combat game. So you need to consider what your pillars are and how you approach those, because if somebody had said, yeah, we like your game, do you want to add combat? And it's like, well, we just said that's not what our game's about. So, there's things there that you want to make sure that you cover off along the way. Again, title comparison. Who are your, what audiences are you trying to pick and grab from? What is your game like? But how does it also differentiate from the titles? It's like this, and it's like this, but it has this. And unique selling points. Again, this is honestly the biggest pain in the ass to write, because you probably aren't the person who thinks about your game as being as unique as it is. And that's why you need to do your research and what other people talk about as unique selling points. Because that's really, it's a hard thing when you're making your title to see what's unique about it. And in fact, it wasn't until after we shipped Yonder that we really found out what our game was about in some ways. And that was because somebody else wrote some text for us and went, yeah, Yonder, it's a slow life game. And it's like, that would have been nice to put in. So, it's totally hard, I'm not saying, this is an easy thing, but, just do your best and figure out what those are to your best ability and get somebody else to help you figure those out if you can. So, why this is useful. Again, it's going to talk about your game in a way that makes the reader want to learn more. High level, include enough information, they can see the potential behind it, but without an entire pitch deck. And that's why I say keep it to 2 pages. And inherently, this is your executive summary. If anybody who's gone through uni and has had to write lots of documents knows what an executive summary is, this is the game development version of it. It's, it is your high level, hey, cool. The thing that's really nice about this, though, is we created this in a way for our project that meant no NDAs were necessary. Companies love NDAs. But the thing is how do you get them to the point where they want to talk to you in enough detail to sign an NDA with you? And that becomes your door opener. This is the thing that goes, hey, cool, isn't this interesting? And they say, well, yes, it is. Let's talk. Let's get an NDA signed. Send me more info. And that's why you create this, because this is the thing that you can use at a very high level. Doesn't matter, treat it as if the whole world could find out about your game at that point. But make sure, it's enough to open a door, and that's why you want it, and that's why it's important, especially when you're cold calling people or say you make meetings with people at GCAP or GDC or wherever it is, you can give this to them in advance, and so you can also go, hey, cool, here's this little bit I've prepared, so that it sets the tone for when you walk into your pitch meetings with those people as well. So it's a really, it became more important to us than I think we realized when we first created it. So the lessons we learned with the sell sheet: it's a door opener. It's fantastically a door opener, especially when you're cold calling. Like I said, keep it to 2 pages maxes, and that includes images, because nobody really wants to read more than a couple of pages, and pretty pictures help. And the nice thing about this is because you keep it high level, once you've created it, you really don't need to maintain it unless you suddenly change your game. This is a one-size-fits-all. This is, you're going to spend your time and effort on it, but that time and effort, once it's done, you can go, cool, this is done, I can PDF it, no need to come back to it. Yep, go ahead.
On your sell sheet, do you talk much about the team composition or background or experience or any of that?
No, those are the conversations that we tend to leave for the, hey, let's talk in detail. It's very much, and again, that's where the company deck can come into play about what your team makeup is and those sorts of things as well, too. That's basically the entirety of hey, look, we can make the game. So we'll talk about that in detail. But yeah, it's literally trying to take what somebody would say about your game in an advertising way and advertise it to people who might be interested in your project.
So. Who were you sending that to?
We sent that with pretty much every cold call publisher that we dealt with. We also sent it to people who we maybe hadn't dealt with but had booked meetings for, like I said, to pitch to in advance, so then that way they had some grounding on it rather than going in cold. It's a nice way to, like I said, just give some background information on what you're going to go into. And inherently, again, this probably goes further into the deck in this pitch the deck that I'm talking about for pitching. But it becomes a easy way for them to look and go, does this fit our portfolio? Are we interested in this? And so it's also nice from a, don't waste people's time. That's, you don't want to waste your time dealing with people who don't want to, talk to you about your game, and they don't want to waste their time because it doesn't fit their portfolio or whatever else. And so it's a nice, really quick way to then just utilize that to figure out, are we compatible? All right, so the meat and bones of pitching is your pitch deck. Assuming, obviously your sell sheet's gone through, you've talked to people, and now they're like, cool, we want you to pitch to us. And it's like, well, crap, how do we write a pitch deck? So this is the fun part. This is also probably the most work. Pitch deck, what's in it? It's a lot, but not, because the reason I say that is every single thing should try and be kept to 1 to 2 slides maximum per topic. And so suddenly you have to distill everything that you know down into very short sentences that fit on slides, and that's a lot harder than it seems. So at the very start of it, you want a title, and you want your one-liner for it. What is the crux of your game? And it's not Harvest Moon meets Dark Souls. That that works, but it's probably not that. You want to talk about your game, not try and compare. You can do that later. People are fine with comparisons, but you want at this stage if you're going to open up your, if they're going to open this and look at it, the first thing you don't want to see is, my game is like X and Y. My game is my game. That's what you want to sell. And again, giving it a logo, even if it's just a project name and some imagery, that sells it. Is, you're starting to figure out what you're doing in your first slide. It's like, hey, cool, okay. They've got a logo. They've thought about this. And again, what was it? An open world exploration game. Oh my God.
Keep going.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it was what was it? An open world exploration adventure game, or did we just say adventure game? I think exploration game. We killed adventure. Open world exploration game where you can, I don't know. Yeah. So it's somewhere in there. I can't remember, to be fair. I think Joel's going to try and look it up for us if he's got access. So we might come back to that later. I don't remember.
It had some touchy-feely thing to it. It was like a game with heart or something.
Yeah. So yeah, then yeah, you can email me about that one. I'll have my email at the end, and I can send it to you. No, that's fine. I'm like trying to think now, and I'm like, God, I don't remember anymore. Okay, so what is your game? This is the distilling of what's not just the premise at this point, but what is the entirety of it? Good luck, trying to distill that down in a slide or two. It is a lot of work and it's really hard. But you're talking about why your game exists. That's your premise. But again, that's only a couple of lines. They don't want to know about that. Really, the main thing when they're doing it, because premise isn't going to sell your game. Story isn't going to sell your game to people. It's going to be, what am I doing? Where am I at? When I load up the game, what am I going to be doing? So, cool. It's set in this fun, fantastic world, and you do things. That's really what your game is. So don't get too hung up on story and premise. If you can get a couple of sentences max, I think you're in a good place with that. And after you said what your game is, this is the other fun part, hooks and gameplay flow. This is something that mobile really focuses on very well. They have really tight, gameplay loops and hooks to get people in, and it's something that console development hasn't done as much of to date, but it's really important to be able to explain what's your overarching gameplay flow, but then also what's your moment-to-moment gameplay flow is detailed as you can get. Harvest Moon, it was, exploring, picking up objects, collecting objects, crafting, completing quests, wash, rinse, repeat. That's kind of, your gameplay loop that you want to get into is, what do you, if you can explain 5 minutes in 5 bullet points, that's probably what you want. Again, like I said, if you want to go into a bit more premise at this stage, go for it. But it's, like I said, not your story. It's just the background of why this world exists, why your player exists in this world, and what's your player's motivation for going forward. It's basically how most games tend to be. I mean, not all of them, but there's a lot of how quickly can you explain the hero's journey wrapped around yours. People who know the hero's journey very much will understand what I'm talking about. But it's like, how can you distill that down? Is to, yes.
Would you say that's just like a flat rule of yours, or do you think there are publishers that can use?
The thing is you know what, they may, and I'm not saying they don't, but at this point they may or may not, but you don't want to give them too much information as well too, because they can always come back and ask you this information. And if you spend too much time, if you spend 3 slides covering your premise, but that's not, you are pitching to people who make decisions about money. If they want to know more about it, they will come back and ask you if they are interested enough in your project. And I think my personal take on it is there's much better places to explain your project than getting stuck on the premise. Because they might even turn around and go, cool, we like this, we like your concept, but what if you give Gruffles guns? Then what happens? You know what I mean? So don't, it needs to be enough, like I said, to establish it and give a grounding for why your game exists, why your player's there and what they're doing. But it's not your story either. It's just the background to say, cool, then you load into the game and you do things. So look and tone. This is a point where you're going to want to start pulling in pictures if you haven't already. Hopefully you have. But look and tone is great for setting a feel and a guide for what your game is. Is it space? Is it sci-fi? Is it, is it nature-y? What's going on here? What's your color palettes? What are your art style aims? The more you can pull out of stuff you've actually done yourself or you've concepted up for your game, much better. If you can pull palettes from somewhere else, cool. But always try and do more for what your game is, and the more that you can put in for your own work rather than take from other people's and lean and go, it's like this, but it's a little bit different. The more you can get it exact, it works. Audience and appeal is very important. This is your business case, really. Who's your game? Who's going to buy your game? Why are they going to buy your game? It becomes, how are the people that are going to give you money going to justify spending money and get their money back on it? Because return on investment is important for all of you. You don't want to make a game that doesn't sell, and they don't want to fund a game that's not going to sell. So you need to know why. For us, we went very much down with Yonder. We looked more at direct audiences and age groups and decided that really, I think age groups, my personal take on it is, and they're not as relevant as they used to be anymore. Our game is for people who like exploration games, that like these genres of games. That's, in my opinion, a much better way to talk about your game than age groups. Because as we know now, cool, you can try and say Skyrim has an 18 to 35 audience or whatever, but then there's that old lady who's doing YouTube videos and she's amazing. So, cool. It's gaming, and yes, she's not the mid-ground for it. But why bother trying to sell yourself into a box of ages when you can talk about people that includes her, that like games in adventure segments or RPG segments, or so consider talking about it in a genre base rather than an age group base. Again, if you can, I don't know if gender matters as much anymore. So we just kind of, we talked about it more from a cool. Here's the things that we do. We did target a couple of age groups specifically, though, and this is where kind of break the mold. Because we made sure when we started getting a focus test with Yonder, we found that it actually worked really well because it had simple controls for a younger audience. And we went, okay, cool. There's something in that we need to consider. And that's not our primary focus, we know that, but it expands our audience because it gets into what we call the family-friendly zone now. Parents who want games for kids that can play, that they can leave them alone, or they can help play with a little bit. So we went, okay, cool. And that meant that we needed to consider how we wrote the game and a few other bits, which is, outside of that, but, third grade reading, reading level, et cetera. But, there are points where maybe you do want to target pieces outside of that. I mean, if you can build a game that you can say, it's going to get all the grannies to play, maybe it's, knitting simulator, I don't know. But, if there's an audience there that's outside of the norm, I think that's where you can start talking about age groups and bringing it in. But again, try and stay away from exact numbers. Oh, no, I don't think that's actually a 12 to 14. I think, that's a 15 to 17. You don't want to nitpick where you don't have to with those sorts of things. So that's why we went younger audience, called it the family-friendly audience, left it there. Yes?
I like what you're saying. Did you still have to try and quantify that? How many people fit in those loves exploration, discovery, or something?
We didn't get asked about it. I think because markets and sales are known, but also past that we did do the, and I put this in the next slide, which is more about where relevant. We did drill down into market comparison of the game is like these. Here's, sort of a triangle diagram of three, I think it was Minecraft, Harvest Moon, and something else. Animal Crossing, I think, and we sort of worked out where in that triangle of games it fit. And we did do market analysis of, cool, these titles sell these, on average, VG charts is about the only place we could find sales figures. On average, this is what these sort of titles sell. So we did, in that, justify it via those means instead of specifically, the family-friendly audience or whatever those are. The thing that does work well, though, with the family-friendly audience is it means places like Walmart will sell your game. And that's actually a big driver for a lot of companies in the US because it's one of their major sales markets for physical copies and media is like Walmart's big W's. So they probably know those stats better than we do about what games sell in those, at retail there. So that was probably enough for us to be able to just say family friendly. Yes?
We also targeted specific publishers for their audiences for specific reasons as well. So in terms of, if you're making a first-person shooter, then in general you want to be targeting investors or partners that are that have a foothold in those sorts of areas. Right? And so regurgitating knowledge that they should already know and should already have is condescending at best and not necessary. So, yeah, it's generally just not necessary to go too deep.
I guess it's potential as well, like if you're wrong.
Yeah, then it's wrong.
Yeah, and that exactly, and that can set its own trap for you, and that's why you try and reel back as much as you can. That's a very valid call on the trap side too.
Did you do any paid advertising, like yourself, or was that handled by your publisher?
And we paid for, at the end of Yonder, we paid for PR marketing external to the budget, so we didn't do anything ourselves.
I just want to follow with that. when they were doing that, did they then set an age range, like, for example, advertising on Facebook, or you didn't?
No, we just basically let the ratings set our age groups for us, and then we had that down. We were pretty certain that we would hit probably what is it? We thought we might hit Peggy 5 or something, whatever. In the end, we got a general Peggy rating, and it was ESRB was not the open one, but one up from it. So ESRB 5, it was all very low though, and that was, we kind of worked out that we needed to keep it there, and within reason we did. There's some fun little things about poo coils and fart noises and things like that are in there. And I think there's something about, we didn't have it in ours, but I think there's some things about vomit and a few things like that, like bodily fluids that may come into play with ratings. But yeah, we tried to keep it pretty low. So.
How long would you estimate your pitch needs to be for the publishers?
I mean, in terms of number of slides or time? Joel, you're probably better at that.
Generally like a half-hour target with the acceptance that goes well. You've got to kind of know your material enough to then talk about it for the first half an hour. If it goes badly, then you're done. So, yeah, your material should cover like a half hour, just because that's usually how much you're looking for. But yeah, that does commonly go on.
How many slides was it?
Well, you say 40 to 50, but we also, the thing with that is too, is I mean, like we had a whole bunch of hidden slides and things like that too. Basically, I think our main one was about 20 slides max, but we had a whole bunch of hidden slides, because the other thing is people might ask you about things that you didn't necessarily want to cover straight away, but you can show you've thought about. Oh, you want to know about DLC? Oh, okay, well, we didn't put that in the main deck, but let me scroll down. Oh, here's our DLC slide, or here's our, platform-specific stuff, those sorts of things. It was all very much it became a thing of, in the pitch deck, and I'll mention it later, but the pitch deck becomes a thing that you will have a billion friggin' variants on this thing. There's no way around it, because what one publisher, like when you start getting into, cool, your project summary, which is on here, which is cool. Why do you want to work with us? Why should we work with you? Why is this project a fit for you? On one hand, our project's a fit because you don't have anything like this. On the other hand, our project's a fit because, you have a lot of things like this. It fits into it. Oh, it's really cool because this platform doesn't have this. Oh, it's really cool because your platform has lots of these. You've got a built-in, so every single time you talk to somebody, it changes. Also, when you talk about what platforms you're going to release on. If you send one of these off to Nintendo telling them you're going to put it on PS4, you're probably going to feel a little bit embarrassed. So we had a whole bunch of different things about what platforms are we targeting, what languages are we targeting, because we also know that certain publishers targeted certain extended language regions that, didn't have it. So again, it becomes a mess of slides. And so you get to a point where you at least know which things you need to change, and you're highlighting all of those in yellow. But yeah, I've got the next is when relevant, which is a whole bunch of additional slides that we had, that we could pull up in an instant if we needed them. And where relevant is what we called them. These are kind of the core slides we had in our deliveries. So does that help? Okay, cool. All right, so was that tone, audience appeal? Development timelines are important. I'll get into that in more detail when I go into the scheduling side of it. But you're going to want to give them a rough estimate of how long is it going to take you to make the game. That's pretty important for them to know. Are you going to take 3 or 4 years to do it? Yeah. Are you going to take 3 months to do it? That's important, so you get into that. But we'll talk about how to show that later. And like I said, the project summary becomes more about why are we talking to this publisher? Why is our project good for this publisher? Why is this publisher good for us? Because different publishers also have different strengths and weaknesses as well. As like Joel said, talking to people who get shooters makes it a much easier conversation. It's like, cool, we're talking to you because you know this market. That's an easy thing. But other side of that is just talk to somebody who only makes nice games, and talk to them about shooters. You need a different set of summaries to talk about with them. All right.
Is this about the order that you had also presented in?
Yes, looking at that, I think that's what I think I pulled that off of Major Topics. Joel, any thoughts on what you'd change?
I think that is literally the order
Yeah.
that we generally show.
Yeah, I think it is too. Because I opened it up and just pulled it out, but I just wanted to see if there's anything that you thought you would have changed too.
So does summary kind of also act as like a recap of the things that were already covered?
Well, like I said, that's the why I call it the summary is why is our project worth funding, and why are we talking to you about funding it? And this was like a 4 bullet point slide for us. It's literally our project fits this niche genre. So yonder, look, we know that the non-combat exploration games are a niche genre. So cool, we know that. So let's not beat around the bush. Let's say, cool, it's a niche genre. There's not a lot of games that fill this market. Which publisher are we talking to? Take your pick on it. If you're going to talk to Sony, it's like, cool, you do a lot of family-friendly titles, but you don't necessarily have anything like this in your portfolio. You'd want to word that nicer, but you're talking to Nintendo, it's like, cool, you have a built-in audience for this. Microsoft, hey, cool, you really don't have anything like this on your platform. That's why this is really interesting. So that's your summary point of also what can the publisher, bring to the table, and what can the publisher do to enhance the visibility and the viability of getting this game out the door. You've got money. I need money. Cool. You can say that in a nicer way too. But cool. You fund projects. That sit in this range, and that's something is important to us is to work with somebody who is funding it, because you cover marketing, QA, whatever those might be. But it's about just kind of crafting the scenario of why your project works for them and they work for you. You're welcome. All right. So here's something I prepared earlier, slides that you'll want to consider having, but you may or may not need them. And again, this comes down to what people get interested in as well too, but it's also good to have these additional talking points ready just in case. Your game pillars. Are people around game pillars here as a whole? Okay, cool. Good, I want to explain then. Your game mechanics as well too. Again, this is the target audience where we started doing market comparisons with the triangle and working out kind of where we fit in amongst all the different titles, as well as market, that's actually market position. Target audience in detail was about sales and things like that, as well as the competitive analysis. They all kind of come together really is the 3 points of your business case. Is there an audience for your game? What's your position, and how is your game going to pull audience in? And what is the reach of all the other titles that come out of similar genres, so that you can figure out how much of that genre pie are you going to grab. Things that can come into this is your project team. We did this initially. I wouldn't do it again now that we've established ourselves, but you may need to pull up a slide that says, hey, cool, this is our team. Because at that point too, again, you're committing to a team of people. And this is that point where we talked with Adric, it's exactly that thing of, it's a catch-22 of committing to something and people taking that, and later your team changes or not. But if you're pitching and this is your first game as a company, it can be worthwhile saying, hey, look, cool, we know what we need to do to ship a game. We can get all the talent available. So it's a catch-22, but it's something we did do. If I didn't have to do it, I would try not to do it again, though. And that's the full team. That's not key people. That's like, hey, we have artists on board. Hey, we know how to do PR and marketing. We've got that on board. We can deliver all the slots. So project budget, you will probably be asked about this. But it's not necessarily something you want to bring up. I would say as a starting point, get them interested in your game, but also be prepared to get asked for it and have one ready at a moment's notice. Unique platform integration too. Again, it depends on who you're talking to and what their remit is. If you're talking to publishers that put it on everything, you're probably not going to want to really talk about, oh, cool, wouldn't it be great if on one platform we integrated with the Wiimotes and you could shake them like, whatever that is. But if you're only talking to a singular publisher on a singular platform, be that Apple or whatever, talk about what you can do to integrate their apps, anything that's interesting feature-wise on a phone or a console. You want to be prepared for that one, because that's value add to why you're talking to that person and why that singular entity would give you money to put that on a singular platform. So your pitch deck, what are you communicating? basically you at this point, it needs to communicate that you know what you're making. You know what your game is, you have control over your game, and you can talk about it in a way that means you understand the detail of it, even if you don't necessarily have all the detail of it down in a GDD or anything else just yet. You understand that there's a market for your game. It has a place in this world, and it should be made. And you know how to deliver that game. You understand, possibly your team makeup, possibly a budget, possibly a schedule, all those things. You need to be able to say, I know how we can deliver this. Your operation costs, again, like I said, this is one of those ones I wouldn't necessarily get into detail on unless I ask for it, but you should know those up front, because at the end of the day, at some point somebody's going to ask you, cool, we like your game. How much money do you need? So, you don't want to sit there and go, let me get back to you on that. You need to know that up front, regardless of whether you make that visible or not. You have a valid business case. Again, you know your markets. You know what slice of that pie you're going to get in those markets. You know why it's relevant, and give or take where you sit within it. Why they should work with you. And that's really important, because through all of this, you're trying to explain that you know your stuff, you know your shit, and you're okay, and you're a smart, intelligent human being, and you've covered all your bases, and that's the way you can encourage them to work with you. It's also, to put it bluntly, it's also the you're not a dick statement. People don't want to work with people who are pains in the butts. They don't want to work with divas. They want to work with people who are down to earth, and they know what they're doing. So that's the other side of the why they should work with you. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you put I'm not a dick in your slides anywhere. Maybe it depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a developer, that might actually go down really well. But, the thing is, you're trying to show that you know your stuff, but you're also a good human.
Is there any particular kind of language that you think people are looking for there? Other than just blatantly saying that you know what you do?
I think it's just the way you present yourself as a human being, the way you present yourself in emails and communication, and the way you write about your game. And you're not, this game is going to sell 5 million copies. Really? Really? Is it? Are you certain? So you're pretty certain you're going to make the next PUBG, are you? Do you see what I mean? You can show a level of grounding through your presentation as well too, and you understand that, and that tends to come from that tends to show a lot about who you are, is how grounded you are and what you're doing. The more crazy and airy-fairy it goes, that starts to be where, is this person gonna make this, is this actually gonna happen? So.
Also, real quick, with the operation costs,
Yes.
on the topic of language, is there any particular language you could recommend there for that kind of just pay my rent?
We'll get into the budget side. We'll get into the budget side in detail, because that's an entire, because it goes past just paying my rent. Then there's a whole bunch of considerations on that. Basically, budgeting in private talks I've done with people, budgeting is honestly the single biggest mistake that people make in how they budget, because they don't factor in how to budget correctly. And there's a little oops mistake on ours when we did our first round of scheduling and budgeting too. So it's just, so we learn from our own mistakes. But yeah, we'll get into detail on how to talk about the ops costs and what that is. Like I said, so why do they should work with you? Because you're a nice human being and you'll be a good person. And why the game is right for them. Like I said, there's a multitude of reasons as to why. Just because they don't do your game doesn't mean that your game isn't right for them, because, hey, portfolio expanding, people like that, something that's new and different. If they think that they can sell it, that's cool. So, don't take anything as nothing's off the table until somebody tells you it's off the table. But, you got to try, right? The worst you'll get is a no, which I know is a horrible thing to hear. But if you don't try, if you don't knock on doors, you're never going to you can't get anywhere worrying about what people are going to say. So you need to knock on doors and let them have the ability to say no, because at least you tried. And so, yeah. So the lessons we learned. Your pitch deck is not one size fits all. This is the thing that will change a lot. And it'll change based on the feedback you get. It'll change based on a whole bunch of scenarios. So you're going to have multiple revisions of this. And just make sure you name your revisions in ways that you know what your most current one is, so that you're not going through 500 of these on your desktop going, wait, which was my most current one? Which one had this information? Because, yeah, this will change. The feedback that you're going to get during your pitch deck process, even if it is bad feedback, or no feedback, as in, no, this isn't for us, is still really important, and you need to listen to it, because every one of those things is going to suck to hear. We got some feedback on Yonder that made me go away for a day and curl up in bed and just be really sad. But at the end of the day, once I got past that no and that bad feedback, it actually made a much better game once I had listened to the feedback. And it also helped us craft how we talked about our game a bit better too. So even the stuff you don't want to hear still has value once you can kind of let yourself be okay with hearing it. And also, let's be fair, the publishers are probably going to be nicer in their no's than the Steam reviews are. So, just saying. Just saying, that's prepare yourself, because Steam reviews is another kettle of worms. Kettle of worms. It is a kettle of worms. Anyway, so be prepared to pitch in person. So, know your material back to front. Be prepared. You might even just have an ad hoc business meeting. I went into a design, at GDC, I went into a design day. So it was pre-GDC stuff, and they were doing like design workshops. And at my table was a guy from Paradox, and he started talking with him, and I pulled up my laptop, and I was pitching within about 5 minutes of saying hi and talking about stuff. So you need to know your material, and you need to be prepared to pitch in person, and you need to be prepared to pitch at any point in time once you start talking with people and talking about your game with them. They will want to know. Also, though, it needs to stand on its own. Because international business, and we're in Australia and everybody else is not, it's the way it goes. You're going to find that unless you want to wait specifically for a GDC, a Gamescom, or a GCAP, so every 4 months, basically, you're going to be asked to send your pitch deck over. And so it needs to be clear and read clearly enough that they can figure out what's going on without you standing in front of it. That also means killing any hidden slides that you might have. It also means looking through your notes. Because if you're writing notes, you want to be careful about what those notes say when you send those off to people. So those are the other hidden gotchas with sending this out, and what I mean by be prepared for it to stand on its own. So you're better off, the more you can talk without having to need notes, the better you're going to be, because you might forget. All right, budget and scheduling. Money for everyone. So, all right, drafting a budget. This is the fun part of knowing your ops costs. Work backwards. Don't work forwards, work backwards. And when I say work backwards, I mean your end goal is not funding to ship the game. Your end goal is how much money do you need the company to stay alive long enough to actually get money back in your pockets from retail sales. That's why you work backwards, because you need to know what your stay alive date is after you ship, and I'll get into details on that. Also know, number of units that you have sold does not equal the number of dollars in your pocket. And I highlight, not all money is equal. And the reason I say that is if you start going into things like bundles, you're going to see cents on the dollar for your game as opposed to selling it directly via whatever platform. So, units, oh yeah, you've shipped 5,000 units. Cool. You shipped 5,000 units at 10 cents. Is that actually really a good return? So it's, not all money is equal when we start talking about units. And also, when you do your budget, the more money you require, the more will start getting expected of you in return. That's honestly probably its own talk. That comes down to things like, do they want a stake in your IP? Do they want your IP? Do they want, do they need to start doing more due diligence on you, seeing, what do your bank statements look like? Do you have insurance set up, et cetera? So the more you ask for, the more you need to be prepared to stump up and be ready to have in advance as well, too. And that's not a bad thing. Like, it sounds like a scary thing, and it's truly not. If you're going to ask for a lot of money, you should be prepared to be set up and be a company and be functioning and have all these things in place anyway. That's what a good business does. So it's, to me, it's a good thing. So scheduling. This is basically what we put in our original pitch deck for Yonder. It makes pretty sense. It's all high level. We know kind of you have development phases, you have alpha stages, you have beta phases, you have submission phases, and then you launch your game. Thing is as I highlighted before, we forgot the what happens after you launch the game. Whoops. That's a thing. Anyway, and so this is what we put in. This is what we pitched. And yeah, I wouldn't obviously do that one again. I learned that lesson, but that's a mistake that, again, comes down to everybody's going to make mistakes on budgeting. It's not a simple thing to think about. But yeah, so we kept it really high level. There is going to be a point where they're going to want to know, cool, what are your milestones? But if you're into that discussion where people want to know your milestones, hopefully, A, you have an idea of what you need to make the game, and B, that means they're actually really interested in you. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing when people start asking you details about this stuff. That means you've passed their first are you worthy filter. So, but for what you want to present, you just want to show them that you understand what the process looks like to get a game out the door in how many months. And yeah.
With like your milestones, so did you ever have a point where they're wanting it done quicker? Is there that thought like, okay, we can scale up, give us more and we can get it done quicker, or do you find this is all kind of set? So?
No, it's a really hard one. Yes, that may come up. It didn't for us, but for us, it came up as hey, cool, we're probably actually going to slip by a couple of months. Cool, we've given you all the money we're going to give you. You knew that at the start, and it's true we did, and that's fine. And so we went, cool, we're taking that onus on ourselves to pay for those months that we slipped and deliver the game because we think it'll be better for it at the end. But again, it depends. On a small team and in a small budget, you're probably not going to get asked about that. I'm assuming you're talking about once you're in, and we did, however, get asked by one publisher more about things like when we did it. And so we had to do cool, what if we did half the budget? What does a game look like then? Because this is what you're pitching is what you want to do with the money you are given. Oh, cool. Okay, well, we weren't prepared for that question, so we walked away and did it. I went, cool, you're going to get a really crap game for half the money, basically, is the answer. It's not like we're going to cram every feature in for half the money because you don't want to kill yourself, and if you can't deliver it, don't tell them you can. And if you give us this much money, which is what we asked for, you get all this. Or, what if you even give us more money? Then you can get all this extra cool stuff, So some people might ask you to scale down to what does an MVP look like of your game, and is an MVP worth doing? Based off of the other content you might actually want past an MVP too. So, the pitch stage, some people may ask those questions at the actual doing stage. We haven't been asked that yet. It's a possible question, but I think if you're a small team, most people are probably not going to assume that you can grow and do a lot of stuff in a way that means that you can turn it around fast enough to make it worth a difference. So the other part of budgeting, I did a whole talk on this one, basically, who's making the game? This is something to consider. How big is your team? What are you doing? Because at the end of the day, when you put a budget together and you put timelines together, you're like, cool, this is how much it's going to take to make the game. Cool. Did you factor in all the tools and everything else that needs to get a trailer cut? Are you cutting that trailer? Trailers are a pain in the ass, let me tell you. And that's possibly a couple of weeks to a month of your time, depending how quick or slow you work on this stuff. So did you factor that month into your schedule? Did you factor those weeks into your schedule? Who's doing the PR and marketing? Because this list is all the things that are going to stop you from actually making the game. But you need money for these because your game isn't getting made during this period, but you still need money. So cool. Who's doing PR and marketing? If that's you, who's managing the email list? Who's, social media? Who's managing Twitter and Instagram? And who's doing the GIFs and cutting the images and getting those up and scheduling this stuff to go out? And you're at a trade show. You've gone over to PAX East. Cool, guess what? You suddenly stopped making the game for a month, for one weekend. And the reason I say that is because you need a demo ready. You need to figure out where your booth is. You need to figure out how you're going to set up your booth. If you're lucky, you can start getting press coming into your booth. Cool, well, that needs to get scheduled too. You need to start getting marketing material done. And by marketing material, I'm talking buttons and postcards at the very least. That all takes time away from making the game. Cool. For management, this is, this can be before and even after. Like, cool, once you've shipped the game, who's looking at Steam and managing your Steam forums while you're trying to bug fix? Fun stuff. Cool, general administration. There's emails to get answered, especially if you're getting funding. You're going to need to do some amount of accountability back for that funding, whether it be milestone deliverables or whatever. So cool, there's lots of overhead and administration you're now doing as well, too. Filing for ratings. Ooh, that's a fun one. That takes up so much time. And there's no easy process for ratings. If you're lucky and you get a publisher, they can do it for you. But if you, depending on, again, all this comes down to what you and your publisher have agreed to. Are they just giving you development budget and nothing else? Well, cool. Then you need to ask for more development budget because you're signing up to do all these things. So that's fun. Setting up all your store presences. I'm not even talking about submission. Your Apple store page, your Steam store page, your PlayStation store page. Cool, what are all the languages you suddenly need to get that into as well too? Oh cool, guess what? You probably need a localization person to sort that out for you too. It is an infinite spiral of other things to do. And depending on who takes this on, if that's you, you need to factor this in as development time that's not development, and your schedule will blow out, and you need to figure out how much that schedule will blow out by to deliver it. Or you need to work out, if you offload this stuff to somebody else, how much money is that going to cost you to offload it so you can keep making the game. This is the basic trade-offs that you need when you're talking about budgets. And this is all the stuff that gets lost and forgotten about. And I highlight, and I did talk a couple of years ago at GCAP on this. We announced yonder at PlayStation Experience, whatever year that was, 16, 17? 2016? I basically stopped designing and making the game from that point forward until we shipped. Because I was dealing with press stuff, I was dealing with GDC, which came only a few months after, because that was in December, GDC was in March. We had to get ready to start talking with people there. Then we had PAX that came right after that. And then we had to start doing. Literally, the only thing I think I did when I got done with that was, besides managing items for press and marketing to do, since we had externals do that, was I managed to get the text done. And, in terms of the voice and the reading levels, and then I found somebody to do the proofreading on that. And I think that's the only major chunk of work I managed to do for about 7 months on the game, because I was doing all of this stuff. So it's not a small amount to work.
Yeah, I can attest to that. we smashed the children around like 9 months of dead time. 3 of that was overseas.
Yep. Yeah, and if you're the only person making the game, you suddenly stop making your game for 3 months. Yeah, no, it's a hard one. Okay, so this is what I talk about when we talk about working backwards. So how long are you going to be supporting the game post-launch? Because that's your end goal. That's what you want money to. Really, if you're going to do 3 months support, 6 months support, also, just give or take, there's likely some contractual obligations if you go with a publisher for how long that support exists. But you cannot say, like we did, yay, I want money until I've shipped the game, right? No, because depending on who you go with and what you do, platform holders can pay monthly, sometimes quarterly. Again, depends on which one. Thing is, though, is even in the monthly pay, if you ship anywhere after, like, say you put your game out on the 2nd of the month, you're actually waiting almost 2 months for that money to come in, even though they pay monthly, because you've missed their billing cycle. So you can easily, at the very least, in your first launch period, you're going to be waiting 2 months for money, and that's only if it's coming directly to you. If you've done it, or if you've had some sort of funding development, which means you're still technically the owner and the receiver and the publisher of it. If you're going with publishers or anybody else, third parties generally pay quarterly. So you're going to be waiting 3 months for your money, possibly 4 by the time you send an invoice and their accountants do their fortnightly runs and everything else. It's likely about 4 months from them before you see your first payment. And don't forget, taxman, 27.5%. That dollar in your pocket? Nope, that's not a dollar. That's already, the minute that money arrives in your bank account, you've shoved almost a third of that aside for somebody else. because you do not want to be caught with a tax bill at the end of this. I can promise you that no matter how big or small it is, you want to start putting that money aside at the start, not at the end. Platform holders, they take their own cut. So when the money arrives in your account, somebody else has already taken their cut out of it. It can be up to 30, as we know. There's other, some companies are taking much less now. I don't know what, mobile platforms take when you're doing premium products, but it can be up to 30%. And don't forget too, tax treaties, because you're doing international business now. That means that you are actually possibly going to get hit with 10 to 15% of your money taken by taxes from that government before it hits your bank account too. Tax treaties are okay. You can get that money back, but you still need to exist till the end of the financial year. And you need a form that says, hey, you already paid this amount of taxes before you get your tax offset. So you still need to exist for however long that is before your next tax year, before you can get any benefit for that money having disappeared as well too. Again, what costs will you cover? We went through a whole list of things, are you covering marketing? Are you covering trailers? Are you covering, anybody to do social media? All those sorts of things. Are you covering ratings? That's all the hidden costs of running and making games that you need to consider. Who's got ownership over those? Is that you? Do you factor it into your budget, or is that the publisher that does that? And if you're expecting them to do it, you need to start talking about that sooner rather than later. This is my budget. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm assuming you will do. What do we got? Setting up and running a company. You're likely going to find that if you haven't set yourself up as a company, you're going to need to do it, because most people like to give money to companies, not individuals. So if you haven't, you're going to need to set up a company, which means you're going to need a company bank account and all those sorts of things. And even just getting a basic company set up is $700, I think, or something like that. So there's stuff around that you'll need to consider doing too. Legal costs to review your contract. You can definitely do this without legal advice if you want, but I would recommend against it. It depends on how much money you're asking, how much you have to lose, but generally you don't want to lose everything. So my recommendation is get a lawyer to work through this with you, because they will also help craft the wording, look at things and hidden gotchas. And even in saying that, you still need to be able to read it and figure it out. You're not a legal expert, but you can't hand something blindly to your lawyer and go, here, does this work? Because your lawyer is going to be like, well, what are you expecting it to say? Do you have any questions around certain aspects of this that don't make sense to you? So even then, you still need to have enough to be able to read through a contract and be able to ask really good questions to a lawyer so that they can help craft and direct that conversation back to you. And contingency. You always need contingency in budgets and in time. So that's kind of, I don't know. There's people say 15, 20%. Figure out what you're comfortable with. At the end of the day, we're all about estimating, and I have a slide back. I have that slide that tells you who's bad at estimating. Oh, whoops! We didn't estimate the extra costs. We didn't estimate the extra costs. So, consider, like I said, what that contingency ends up being, because there's a lot of factors that you're going to be bad at figuring out. The company deck. So this is the next little beast. And I didn't include a lessons learned on the budget because basically our failure and the first slide was pretty much our biggest lesson learned. So company deck. Right. So this is kind of a basic, weird thing. I really didn't know how to describe it. Not everybody wanted it, but it was wonderful to have, because at the end of the day, cool, are you a company? Yes, I am. I'm a company. I can give you my details. I can tell you I have an ABN. I can tell you all these things. Enough to give them an idea that they're dealing with basically an adult. Do you know how to business? Company brief. The company brief, cool, that's a little bit about the company's background. What does the company do? Where is everybody from? What are you doing as a company? What's your goals as a company? And that ties into your mission statement as well too, which is more about, cool. I highlight Ninja Theory, I think, always has a really interesting company mission, which I think is something along the lines of cinematic, story-driven combat. Cool, what's your mission? What do you want to deliver? Who do you want to be? That can change, like, don't worry about that. But at some point you need to kind of give them an idea of, where you're positioning your company. We go for, in ours, we are world builders and player-driven experiences. It's nice enough to be generic. We're not locking ourselves into a genre, but it's enough to talk about where our skills in our company lie as well too, and the types of things that are most important to us when we're making games. And cool, it can change. Guess what? For the right amount of money, we'll probably suddenly be combat specialists too. Hey, it's just the way that it works. Key personnel and background, cool. Who are your key? This isn't your full resource thing to say, I know how to make a game. This is the thing that says, my company is staffed by adults. My company is staffed by adults who know how to make games, and they are really good people at making games. And this is where you sell your individual key people. This is where you go, cool. Guess what? We're all ex-AAA. Hey, here's some titles we worked on. Here's our thing. Here's our skill sets. Because amongst, everybody, we can make, a cohesive unit managing a company and managing the development process of getting the game out. And you have to pull yourself back at that point from, are you the game maker versus are you the person that is running a company and can oversee the process of getting a game out. They're two different things. You will be both, don't get me wrong. You will totally be both. But at this point, can you oversee what making a good game looks like? Can you oversee what shipping a game looks like? And that's what they want to know about. And I always say, anybody, if you can ever get anybody with a production background, you really should get one in. That's, I think, the biggest weakness I've seen with a lot of indies. Adric's smiling. You really need somebody who's got a production background. It might not be full-time, it might be only a bit of it, but if you can say this person understands scheduling, understands resource management, understands those things, it goes a long way to showing that you can get the full gamut. I'm not saying that that's going to sink your title if you don't have one, but it helps a lot because it's the least utilized role in indie studios. It really, truly is, because people see it as one of the... Look, would you rather have somebody who can tell you what your Jira board looks like, or would you rather have somebody who can make art or animation or code? Yeah, and so most people go that I want people who can make things, but inherently when you start asking for money, you need people who can convince the people giving you money that you are doing all the things you need to do. And you're doing them in a smart and intelligent manner, and that's why having somebody in the production background comes in. They're also your shield, because if you start getting stuff through and the administration and those things and questions, they can then allow you to keep making the game while they're answering those questions. I see lots of nodding. Have you been there, Adric? Yeah. A little bit. So that's something to really consider when you do it. Again, previous titles shipped, assuming you're a new company and you haven't, and I mean, even if you're an established company, cool, your company will have its own titles, but also what has your team worked on outside of that? And that's really important, especially when you're a new company, to at least say, look, our team knows, when we said we were making Yonder, we're like, hey, cool, guess what? We're gonna make an open world game. Our core team is 3 people. Yeah, that sounds really smart, right? Up until you go, yeah, cool, our team has worked on games like Batman. It is, one of the biggest open world games you can get, in a way. So aside from an MMO, but you get what I mean. Like at that point, it's like, oh, that's actually way more believable now, isn't it? Oh, they might actually know what they're doing. So you need to balance those things out too when you say that. And if at that point you've won any awards for previous games, shove them in there, gloat, be, this is your point to go, fuck yeah, we're amazing. This is, this is what you want to basically, communicate, which is, I'm an adult and we're amazing and you really should have faith in us to give us money because we know what we're doing. You're a real company. You're staffed by real adults. This is the point where, we all take off our game dev heads and we're like, yes, I'm a real adult, really? And then, yes, I know how to adult properly. And again, like I said, show that you can deliver on what you're making. Cool, our team has the experience to, do the crazy narrative game. Cool, because you have somebody who's a narrative designer on your team, Those are the things that make it important for you at that point to show that you can actually do what you want to do. And use this as an opportunity to say that you're more than the game that you're pitching right now. One of the things we always do in our pitch deck for a company one, cool, guess what? We've got some other ideas too. We're not just this title. We are not a one-hit wonder. We already have ideas for other things we want to do. We'll put in like a little slide and maybe just do like a little, project name for it and a few bullet points about what it is. But you want to show, if you can, that there's more than just this in you. Maybe it's, hey, I've already thought about this game, and this game could be a franchise, and I've already thought about different ways to franchise this game out. Whatever it is, show them that you're just more than what you're making right now. It goes a long way to helping them believe that you are, thinking about what you're doing. And, again, even if it's just really rough, that's all right.
So, in a situation where you're pitching your first game and you don't have any a backlog of ships and titles, what sort of things are publishers interested in knowing about you to convince them that you're an adult?
That comes down to things like, cool, have you set up a company? What sort of tools are you using? Is Google Drive where you're doing all your documentation? Maybe not the best place to be doing your documentation. You can get a 10-user license of things like Confluence and Jira, I think, for like $5 a month or whatever. Maybe, figure out your cost benefits of what you can do. I think there's some, Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are there not some of the source code repositories that are really cheap when you're a smaller team too? Yeah. Yeah, so, things like that, anything that you can do to show them that you know what you're doing, cool, we're using the right tools. We're not, we're just not doing, crazy random Google Drive, here you go sort of thing. And it's just trying to distill down anything that you can. It's kind of like a job interview, really, at that point, when you're starting out in an industry. Yeah, cool, I haven't done this, I can't prove this to you, but here's all the things that I've done, elsewhere, and I can pull them all together. And, we can prove to you that we know what we're doing in a way that makes sense, even if we haven't done exactly this thing. And anything, like all those things, like I said, just start figuring out what industry standard tools are. Start trying to utilize those and bring those into your pipeline where appropriate. Because that's a simple way to just show people you know what you're doing, because you're using things that are expected. You're not, like I said, you're not trying to, shove builds up onto Google Drive or whatever else to send to people. Cool, we have a proper AWS server. You pay for the data that's in there, so it's really not a lot to have an AWS server, which is more secure for your storage of these deliveries than something else. There's just all those little things that you can do, and anything you can use to demystify, I'm doing this cheap is the way to go, really. Joel, anything else you can think of?
I just clarify really that at that stage, when you're simply proving to people that not that you can do this, but you are currently doing it. People generally don't want to pay you for the risk that you're going to do something that you're unable to quantify or demonstrate right now. Like there's a little bit of that where you can go, cool, once we've got the budget, then we can staff up with these 2 more members that will be key for these reasons. But 90% of it, they want you to be able to have demonstrable right now. And so if you've got no easy go-to for hey, my team's made up of these people and I've got these skills or whatever, if it's true entry level, we're out of uni, we've got this sweet thing, we're really excited about it, then it's unfair and it sucks, but you need to be prepared to make the leap of faith, to basically set yourself up to be ready to go at that point. So you need to be in a position where you can start developing that when you're publishing.
When you're pitching or publishing?
Oh, yeah, pitching, sorry.
That's all right.
The other keyword.
One of the things we got asked when we were talking to this fellow traveller was just who are your mentors around you? Because Think the Children was our first game, but they were interested to know if you fuck up, who can you go talk to that's going to help you out with this check? And so being able to say I look up to Morgan and have chats with him and stuff like that. That was a big cool. Yeah, we like to hear.
Yeah.
We know who that is.
At that sort of entry level point, I feel it's definitely important to have support structures in place. That's a necessity. and yet you can use that to further your position of trust, and like even better, it's a really good thing to be.
Does that help? Okay. All right. Okay. So, lessons we learned while doing the company deck. It's important to some people, and this is especially true inherently of any of the publishers that will come out of your Asian territories. This is, their former old school business, so this they love. It may or may not be important to other people in general. But it's something to have in advance, because again, if somebody asks you for it, and it saves you the hassle of scrambling around on Google and going, sure. We got lucky because we were talking with people that were elsewhere in their time zones, and by the time they asked us for it, it was known that we had gone to bed, so people weren't expecting anything. So at least we had that. Oh, here's one we prepared earlier because magic time zones. Which is great, but you can't always count on that being the thing. And somebody, again, if you're sitting there at GDC talking with somebody and they ask, cool, what about your company? Tell us a bit about that. Oh, cool, here's my slide for this. Because, the minute you get into those circles where you're exposed to those people, this stuff, you don't know who's going to want it and who's not. So again, this is why I raise it. It's one of those ones where it's like, don't spend a lot of time on it, but spend enough time to make yourself, like I said, look like you're a real adult, you're a real company, and you know what you're doing, and it's all good. So this is more general advice. So this is the general things to consider when doing all of this as a whole. Don't waste people's time. And I say that immediately because the first thing when we were pitching Yonder that we had to get ourselves to stop worrying about was asking for money. Do you want to be 5 emails down a chain before you say, oh, and we want money? Or is it better to say, hey, cool, we're approaching you. This is our game. We're seeking funding. Funnily enough, we were really worried about that. I've yet to meet anybody who said, no, we don't have money. So don't let that stop you, but don't also sit there and bury what you really want and need so that you've wasted your time through 5 emails and their time through 5 emails, because that's going to leave a bad impression on you with those people, and you don't want that. Be upfront about what you want. Now, this might not be in email 1, but again, like I said, you need to know about the things that you want somebody else to deal with. Do you want them to take on QA? Do you want them to take on localization? Do you want them to take on ratings? I mean, shit, you want them to take on everything, basically. Let's be fair. But, is that actually, again, that works. What publisher? Is that something they normally do? But, talk about these things and know what it is that you want so that you can talk about them in a reasonable manner and be able to say, cool, here's my budget, here's my timeline. The assumptions on this are, I'm doing this, you're doing this. If we need to juggle, cool. Obviously there's a time and money consideration that change based off of these things. But if you haven't thought about them, you can't even start to have those conversations. So you need to be upfront about those. Again, know who you're talking to and why. And this is important about the individual person and where they sit in the company as well too, what they have done in the past, but also what company they represent and what that company does. And, so it's down to the individual as well as who they represent as an entire company. Are you talking to the junior who's just going to be like, yeah, cool, thanks for that. I need to send this back to my boss. Because I'm not saying you shouldn't treat that junior with the same amount of respect as if you're talking to their boss, but it helps you understand the frame at which you need to talk about things. And also, do you need to spend an hour and a half pitching to them if it still needs to go to somebody else? Or can you distill that down in a way that works for you and them in a much shorter period of time so that they can get that to their boss quicker? So there's all those sorts of things you need to consider about who they are. You will need a working demo prototype of some descript. I've yet to meet anybody who, in the indie game circles, says, cool, I got my idea funded. Maybe somebody, really big like Cliffy B. I don't know who. I'm sorry, he's not Cliffy B anymore either, is he? Shame on me. But yeah, you will need a demo at some point. People will only go so far in the conversations with you until they can actually see what you've been doing. There's no way around this. And God, please, if you can get an idea signed without a demo, buy a lottery ticket because you are the luckiest person I know. But yeah, be prepared to show what you're working on. And if you're talking about, like when we were doing Yonder, one of the things we talked about was, cool, guess what? We're going to make an open world game. Cool, guess what? You better show that you can make an open world game. All that tech better be there. You know, consider, and it's not just here's a little bit of something I'm making, but consider what your core things are that you're selling. Yep.
Which begs the question, how much time and money did you spend making your playable working demo before you got funding for your first game?
That was done we had a very interesting journey. It started off as weekend work. Well, we both still had full-time jobs. I think we worked at it was probably about 3 months on the demo. But then we also, at some point, that was where we were living in the UK as well, too. And we had quit our jobs and moved back to Australia at that point because we just kind of wanted out of the rat race and we wanted to give the indie thing a go. We had money in the bank, moved back. We did a little bit of development, but actually we spent about 4 months pitching. 4 months solid, no development, because pitching takes a lot of time. And then we started working on it a little bit more based off of feedback from people and what the demo was. And that was probably another month, I'd say, of work on it, more full-time than before. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
And if you tried to convert it into a dollar figure, like, because you can treat it like a hobby thing and kind of push it forwards in that way. It's like, hey, your time's free sort of thing. If you convert it to a dollar figure, it's like, consider with safety, like 2 people, 6 months. That's probably a good mid-round estimate.
And that included things like setting up the company so that we could start registering for things like getting into Sony's systems and registering for dev concepts through all the different, because this was from console based. But yeah, we needed that company set up because you cannot register for any of those platforms. You cannot get any of those development kits unless you have a company set up. So there was all that money and time in that side too. And like I said, pitching alone, getting all this done, pretty much stopped work for both of us for a good, I'd say, 4 months. So we were in a position where we had 4 months to do it because we had banked basically London dollars when it was $2. Was it $2? £1 was basically almost $2 Australian dollars. It was like 1.8. So we were saving and living like students in the UK. But when we came back, we had the money to fund that runway to do that. So in terms of real money, God, I don't even know what it would have taken.
Or like, you said 2 people, 6 months, or 1 man year plus expenses gives the idea. Yeah.
So,
With that, like 4 months, just dedicated to pitching, because we are so isolated, were you traveling that time, or was it very much just
email. It was all online. We still did pitching in the end to people like at GDC and stuff, but pretty much everything we had done was online, and we had actually sorted everything more or less by the time we got to GDC. We were just still, we had something at that stage in hand, but we also know that things happen, contracts get pulled, and so at the same time, you don't also want to put all your eggs in one basket. So we still continued to talk to additional people, even though at that point we had something, like I said, in hand that was going to go well. Again, too, hey, who knows? Maybe somebody's looking to buy out a studio. Likely won't happen, but who knows? There's always those weird options. So you keep talking to people.
How much time was it between being greenlit and actually having ink dried?
And seeing money? It was 9 months. 9 months. So the whole process was 9 months. Let me work this out. So we started pitching June-ish, had something greenlit in September, and we didn't see money in our bank account until March the following year. So that was a 9-month process, all up. Do not assume, if you can get something signed in less than 6 months, you are working with somebody who's really fantastic. Assume that from start to finish, it's at least 6 months before you see money from it too. So be prepared to fund yourself during that period.
It's entirely possible and common to have a quick turnaround for smaller scale stuff. It is fair to say that we were asking for and hitting above our weight category. So there was extra time involved there, basically, like, you know, getting up trust, get everything formed away and squared away for, you know, internally for the publisher that we went with. So there's probably a bit of extra time in that. So having said that, like, you know, don't be afraid to actually aim above what you would think, you know, you might need to, like, you know, scrape it up and do it on a shoestring. Like, you know.
With that then, like, if it is that kind of like very delayed, is part of your kind of pitch there just like refunding my expenses that we've had in that time, or is that, have you just taken that as like that's the stuff we're going to pay for?
There's a good part of that which is also your investment in it as well.
Yeah.
Like, so you can do that, but it's also worth considering whether that's the investment that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're bringing an IP and investment in a prototype, like, you know, so maybe that's 6 months worth of man work, so, like, that's value. None of that's free. You're bringing that to the table. So, you either get more money or you get better recoup or better terms, whatever that is. Yeah, that's your chips on the table.
Yeah, it's all leverage for those discussions too. Cool. We started this discussion here. Now we're here. And now we're starting to talk about the contract side. But actually, in that period, we've had 4 months of us putting in, you want, let's pick a number. You want 66%. Well, actually, we think it should be 58 because we've actually put in X amount more percentage of our own money in that time frame. And this is that point of, even if you don't literally put $1 into it, this goes back to that stop pretending that your time is worth nothing. Your time will always have a value on it because if you have been producing anything, you have been producing value. So.
What was it that like what were a few of the triggers that you stopped doing the game dev as a hobbyist and actually started looking for a publisher?
God, I'm trying to think of the answer to this. Really, we've always worked within studios that were funded by publishers. And it's the route that was most comfortable to us to work for funding. Also, we came back with, you know, like a year's worth of funding in our bank account to pay for mortgage and a few things like that. So, cool, if you want to make something more than a year, how do you do that? But we got kind of, when we first did this and talked to some people that we knew here that are friends of ours, they kind of laughed at us when we said, yeah, we're going to go do this. We're going to go talk to publishers. We're going to get money. And they're like, publishers don't give money. That's cute. Pat on the head. And here we are. They do. And in fact, they really, if you look at things right now, things like Microsoft buying, you know, this is the AA, you know, small AAA studios, you know, taking your Ninja Theories and taking, the guys who did We Happy Few and some of those studios that are doing those things now. It's showing that they need content. They need this you know, everybody does. At least I can speak to this more so in like the console PC game space. So they're starting to do those deals again, and money is starting to flow a bit more because basically indies, in my opinion, are becoming what AA studios used to be. We're filling the gaps of the studios like Chrome, but instead of teams of 100 people, we're now teams of 10 people. So, and they need that content because AAA games, like how many AAA games do you truly see getting produced on a yearly basis? They cannot survive alone getting that content on their platforms. They need more than that. So that's where we come in, and that's where that thing is, that money is starting to flow again because there is people making really good titles in the AA space. I think Yonder, which is my first game as a designer, actually rated higher than any other game I've worked on at Chrome at that point. So it's, I think, you know, one of my higher rated games that I ever made, you know, if you look at Metacritic. So, you know, look, it's, you know, we're starting to take that place, and we're starting to learn from those mistakes that we had in the past that maybe weren't as good with the, you know, with what we did in previous development cycles, and that's why we can distill down to a team of 10 people who can make a really good game now.
So, about those triggering factors, would you like? I'm trying to work out what a publisher would give us that we can't do ourselves at the moment.
If you can fund your own game and you can pay for all the ancillary things like I listed, or you have the ability to cover them somehow, whether it be, whether it's through your own money or your time because you know that that's coming in, then I would say maybe not, unless you think you can make something bigger and better if you had that money, or you think you can get a better reach if you had somebody who's got more marketing behind them than you do. Those are the types of things that you need to consider, is what you can do versus what you can sell. And some people will come in late. There's a lot of what they call white knight developers who will help fund things towards the end, bring in the marketing power and those sorts of things. And that's, again, if you can get the marketing reach on your own and you can do all those things and you can afford to do it, then consider doing it yourself the first time around. But also consider the other side of that is if you gave somebody 25% of your sales, could they reach more than 25% more audience than you? Because if they're going to earn their keep through, if they can reach 50% more people and possibly 50% more sales, then why wouldn't you want to work with somebody? Because that's going to actually return, better investment to you at the end of the day. And those are the things you need to weigh up.
So at the moment, I was going to be completely honest here, that we work on our project as a hobbyist thing, sort of when we get home. And the publishers have actually reached out to us now, and that's making everything a bit too serious for my liking. And I'm trying to toss up, do I actually want money from these people, or do I enjoy the freedom I have, obviously doing it?
Yeah, so money, and to be clear though, the money doesn't necessarily take away the freedom. One sec, Joel, are you able to get me some water? Thank you, sorry, I ran out of tea. Thank you so much. Just consider the money a lifeline to being able to do the extra things that you wanted to do, possibly because, if you don't have any time constraints, you don't necessarily have the, oh man, we stuffed up, we should have planned for DLC or whatever else. However, also consider the other side of this. Is somebody going to beat you to the market because you're doing it yourselves? And if you could have done this full time and you had funding, you could have gotten it out sooner. And I know what you mean. It does make it really real, and it makes it kind of, it does make you want to basically throw up in your mouth a little bit at times. There is definitely, thank you so much. There's definitely a side of that where it's just like, oh God. But not everybody asks for the same amount, and not everybody does the same amount. Our first project was literally development funds, more or less. We didn't have any funding. We still had to do all the PR marketing and everything else ourselves. It was just there as a top-up to help us do what we wanted to do to make the game and get it out. The only trade-off was we had a period of exclusivity with platforms on it. So, and
at the
that,
same time, we didn't lose any development freedom. We didn't have stakeholders going, yeah, but can you add multiplayer? So it was implicit development trust as well.
So in simple language, because the publishers don't use that I've been speaking to, what are they after? Because our game's it's in the strangely polished prototype phase, and I haven't communicated with any of these people. I haven't reached out to them. What's in it for them besides? I don't know what they're looking for.
It can depend. I don't know who the publisher is, and maybe that's something we can have a bit more of a detailed discussion about after if you want. But it depends on what they're after. Like I said, portfolio piece, something that adds to the audience that they're working on. It can be possibly they see potential. Maybe you don't see as much potential in it as they do, and there's something there. They can be, if you haven't gotten really far in discussions, if you go further, you might find that what they're actually after is buying the IP as part of the funding process in there somewhere. It depends. There's honestly a lot of different publishers out there from, we'll give you development funds, we don't want anything for it, we just want a portfolio piece and we will take a timed exclusive and that's it, down to we want your IP and we want X amount of royalties, etc. It's a big swathe of depending on who you talk to, really.
The best thing to do is simply ask them, what are you actually after? They will tell you. No one is against talking about their business goals or how to align with that. And in fact, that can actually become a very good discussion for how could you work with them to further that specific goal. Because it could be something as simple as, oh, well, we just don't have many games like this, and we feel like we can pull a better market in, like, you know, or it could be that, you know, we want to return on investment. We want to pay you $1 and get $3 back.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get more dollars as well.
And one last thing, sorry. I see it's the point of the slide, but could you elaborate on how, like, to make the no not forever no?
Oh yeah, so we've approached one publisher that has said no multiple times, and yet we still talk with them. We still have a really good relationship with them, and they still invite us to talk about what we're currently working on with them every time, because there might be a point where we actually hit something that they like and actually fits. And because that can come down to funding, that can come down to what's already in their portfolio at the time you're recommending you would ship your game. There's a whole bunch of things, that can play out. And business isn't, like I said, somebody might say no right now, but you could possibly pitch the game to them in 6 months again, once you've polished it and they can see a better vision of what you're doing as well too. They just might not feel they know enough about what you're doing yet to put money down, and that same person could say yes later. It's really just down to keeping those relationships open, keeping in touch with those people, meeting them every single, every conference you go to. Hey, you going? Let's catch up. Let's say hi. I can talk to you about what I'm doing. We've yet to meet anybody who says, no, I don't want to talk to you again.
Just for fun, can you tell us how many publishers said, oh, we really love what you've got, can you make this game for us instead?
None. I think they're used to dealing with indies now in the space of we're coming to you with a cool new IP and we're coming to you with a thing. We're not against that, though, at the same time. I mean, collaboration is a thing that exists. And, at the end of the day, are you going to keep your company open, and do you want to keep your job, or do you want to make only the things you make? And if you have the ability to make only things you want to make and not lose a job, cool. But, now that we've moved into the company process, I'm happy to collaborate on those. And we've had people talk to us about possibilities of that. And it's actually a fun thing to explore, in my opinion, is what could you do with somebody else's IP? Or what if you took this and turned it into a different thing? Because you know what? Even if you don't do that, it still gives you food for thought about possibly future projects and things that you can put up your sleeve and say, oh, hey, cool, these are the things that, we've considered. For us, like, at least for me, I guess really more so, one of the things I was most excited about is when we signed Yonder on with Nipponichi in Japan, and we jokingly said, hey, cool, do you guys want to let us take some of your characters and put them in Yonder and we can do some things? And they said, hey, yeah. So we have Flan Wings and Laharl stuff and Zeta backpacks. And you know what? That was fun. So, there's little things that you can possibly still do with those people as well, too, even if you make your thing. No, maybe not this, but what if we took some of those elements and put it in there for fun or whatever else, too? So there's ways you can work with that still. But I think there's still something to be said for opening yourself up to change. If it's the right change and if it's something you're comfortable with, I wouldn't suggest selling your company's morals to do it. I don't think if somebody had said to me, we'll make Yonder with guns, I would have done that because that inherently goes against what I wanted that game to be. But somebody else could have taken over design lead on that and have done something with that that was more to, the possibility of doing that as well. So, maybe you can, there's no reason you can't find somebody else if it doesn't feel right for you. If it still seems like a good deal, maybe somebody else can do the things that you don't want to do instead. I'm not particularly interested in trying to make violent games or things. I still play them, but it's not really my forte. I don't really want to make hit things with sticks games. But like I said, guess what? If the money's right and it fits, you can get somebody else in with the money that can help figure out how to make the hits, hit things with sticks game. So does that help? Okay. All right. Go ahead. You're fine.
What does the subject line look like for a cold call email?
I think we did introduction, Prideful Sloth, dash project name or something like that. Dash,
Yeah, it depends on who you contact. Kind of knowing who you're talking to is up there on the board, but for instance, like, you know, for people that we've talked to in the past and we're on a regular basis with, and like, be a lot more informal, like, you know, hey, we've got an exciting, like, you know, thing for, like, and I'm pumped about. Really, it's the subject, like, doesn't really matter. But yeah, obviously, again, don't waste people's time. It's like, you know, make it known in the pitching, make it known that you got something, make it known who you are. Very much what you need.
And I always tried to keep the company name in the emails so that, it gave a frame of reference to who was reaching out to them. So, you know, introducing Prideful Sloth dash project whatever name or something like that, just as a way, because it also makes it more searchable and more filterable too for them. And if they just really don't want to talk to a new company and they understand that it's a cold call introduction, they can also just easily filter it and hit delete. Because again, you know, if they don't want cold calls, if they don't want them, you don't want to waste their time. You don't want them to waste your time either. So, you know, that's another way to just make sure that it hits a filter for them quickly too.
Just to clarify with that as well, like your question was specifically about cold calls. Ideally, perfect world scenario, you had an opportunity to, like, you know, go to an event, talk to people even before you pitch something. Usually that's not the case. Like, you know, you'll do a pitching round and, like, you know, that'll be your first introduction to people. But it doesn't have to be. Like, don't be afraid to just talk to people. Like, you know, email whoever. Like, you know, don't be afraid if it's Nintendo or someone. Like, you know, whoa, wouldn't it be cool if we worked with these guys? Email them. Like, you know, say, hey, cool, we're, like, you know, even if you're at a hobby outfit sort of level, say, like, you know, making a hobby game, I think it might be cool for the Switch. Well, I'll just talk to someone about it. Like, being afraid of communicating and talking to people or just opening up, like, the possibility of discussion, people get really antsy about it and think, like, you know, wait, like, come on this way and they'll never want to talk to me again, or it just doesn't happen like that. Like, you know, people are people, so you can approach them before making a cold call for, like, you know, and doing a pitch and develop relationships beforehand.
And also, just to chime in on that too, utilize your networks, because ask anybody, hey, does anybody I know have a contact at this place? Cool, if so, can you find out whether they're willing to, you know, can you introduce them to me? And, you know, if it works, what they'll do is they'll email that person and just say, hey, there's this person I want to introduce you to, is that okay? And, you know, so utilize your networks where you can too for your first in. I think there's only a couple of companies we ever found that we couldn't find contacts for in the end. But otherwise, either directly or also things too, like, I know that he's gone now, but like they had Ed Valiente used to do out of Europe, which is where most of the Australian stuff gets routed to through Nintendo. He used to be their kind of indie guy, and he was pretty open about putting his details out there, whatever, you know, so possibly you can, if you find somebody that's in that sort of role, reach out on Twitter, DM them or tweet them and, hey, I want to talk to you, you know, are you going to be at any of these conferences, or is there a way to talk to you? Because that's pretty much those people's roles, is to start talking with indies and start, you know, working with people. So, and we talked to Ed and talked to him about what we were after, and he's like, oh, well, actually, what you want is in a different department, and he introduced us to somebody over there. So that was our in through Ed to go, you know, to somebody else in Nintendo as well, too, to answer some questions for us. So, you know, that's, you know, wherever you can find a foot in a door, it's a good thing to utilize. Obviously, you don't want to email the QA manager or something like that. You know, they need to be relevant feet in the door. But, you know, those people exist on Twitter. Chris Charlo is pretty active at Microsoft on, you know, on Twitter as well too. I don't know if he would respond to tweets or not, but those people have, you know, quite a presence, because that's their job to hype up. You know, he's the Xbox ID guy. So look for those people too on social media.
Yep. Yeah, so you two came over and started working on a prototype. At what point did you, what was the gap in time, I guess, between talking to publishers and increasing the number of people working on that game?
Money?
So the thing that was what drove it.
Yeah.
Was it publishing deal led to increasing the team?
At that point, yes, because that was our first one. I mean, we had enough to get the prototype out, and we had paid for some extra work to come along to help with some of the art, if I remember right, on some of that. But our team expansion, which actually wasn't much, was at the point which we knew we had a contract that was going to come in and get signed, and then we could go, cool, now we can start making the strategic hires. The thing is, though, is we already knew who those people were going to be. We'd already talked about them. We already had those conversations with them. So it wasn't a hard thing to then get those people on board either. And you really should be prepared to have those conversations up front because, again, when we were pitching, we said, cool, here's our team that we're going to use. And are you, and you make sure, cool, are you okay with your name going up on this? Because, this is what I need this for, and people can say yes. And so we'd had those conversations back when we started pitching as to who we would consider hiring and why and what. So they were pretty much already locked in. All right. Yeah, I think you guys have probably all been staring at this. Do I need to go through this, or have you read through it all? Anyway, yeah, okay. So basically, there you go. Good luck. That's pretty much, I think, the roadmap of our pitch document. Thanks for listening. You can email me, basically. If I don't respond, poke me again. My accountant has learned that it takes 3 emails before I get this stuff's on fire, and I probably should respond. But I also you can bribe me with coffee. That's generally a good way to get me to respond quicker, too, if you want to talk. But anyways, that's the formal end of it. If we want to keep going with questions or go down to pubs or whatever and talk more, that's a thing too. But
Yeah. Thank you.